Today, we're going to dive into a really revolutionary idea, one that completely flipped our understanding of human cultures on its head. It's a story about how one brilliant and, frankly, very determined anthropologist took on the entire scientific establishment of his time and ended up setting a whole new course for the field.
And you know what? It all starts with a surprisingly fierce debate. A simple question, really. How should we organize artifacts in a museum? Should we group them by what they are or by who made them? The answer to that question would trigger an intellectual earthquake, and it all begins with the big, dominant theory of the day. So before our story really gets going, you have to understand that anthropology was pretty much dominated by one single powerful idea about how human societies worked. It was called unilineal cultural evolution, and pretty much everyone just accepted it as gospel. The idea itself was actually deceptively simple. I want you to picture a single ladder of human progress. Way down at the bottom, you've got what they called primitive societies, and at the very top, civilized ones, which, and I'm sure you're shocked to hear this, looked a whole lot like 19th century Europe. Every single culture was believed to be climbing this exact same ladder, just at different speeds. Okay, so into this established world walks our challenger, a German-American anthropologist named Franz Boas. And the battleground for his first major fight? None other than the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. This is where that whole argument over pottery really happens. On one side of the debate, you've got O.T. Mason, a classic evolutionist. He wanted to group all the pottery together, all the stone tools together. You get the idea. His goal was to show visitors these so-called evolutionary parallels, to prove that all humans everywhere invent the same things in the same order. But Boas, our challenger, he had this totally radical idea. He said, no, group everything from a single tribe together. He argued you can't possibly understand a pot or a tool without understanding the specific culture that actually made it. And this is where it gets really cool. When the museum actually tried it his way, a super clear pattern just popped right out. Tribes that lived near each other had similar artifacts. This proved that cultures didn't just independently climb that imaginary ladder. Instead, ideas and technologies spread from group to group, kind of like ripples in a pond. This concept is called diffusion, and it was a huge blow to the old evolutionist theory. But you know that museum debate? That was just the opening shot. In 1896, Boas published this landmark article that just systematically dismantled the entire unilineal evolution theory, piece by painful piece. He basically argued that the whole theory was built on a foundation of sand. In fact, he pointed out three critical, absolutely fatal flaws that made the whole thing intellectually and scientifically bankrupt. Okay, so flaw number one, he pointed out that the core idea, that every culture develops in the exact same sequence, was a complete and total assumption. There was zero proof, none. Second, he took on this idea of survivals, these supposed little traces of primitive stages in modern society, and showed that it just didn't hold up under scrutiny. And third, and this might be the most damning one, the evolutionists were building their grand theories on incredibly weak data, often just stories from travelers or missionaries, not from rigorous scientific observation. So, after tearing down the old house, what did Boas propose to build in its place? Well, he offered a brand new way forward, a theory that actually respected the complexity and uniqueness of every single culture. And here it is, historical particularism. The name really says it all, doesn't it? Each culture is particular, a product of its own unique history. Instead of one single ladder of progress, Boas saw a world of countless branching paths, each one shaped by its own specific circumstances. This meant that to understand any culture, you first had to understand its one-of-a-kind history. So what this means in practice is that two different societies could end up with, let's say, complex agriculture or metalworking, but they could have gotten there through completely different routes. One might have learned it through trade and diffusion, another might have been pushed by a unique environmental pressure, and a third could have just stumbled into it through a series of historical accidents. There is no single formula. Now, to practice this new kind of anthropology, Boas demanded a whole new method. No more armchair theorizing from a comfortable study in London or Berlin. He insisted that anthropologists had to do field work. You had to go live with the people you're studying, observe them, participate in their lives, and meticulously collect data on everything. Only after you've gathered mountains of objective information could you even begin to think about forming a theory. For Boas, the old theory wasn't just bad science, it was morally flawed. It was rooted in a concept that we still fight against today: ethnocentrism. This is that tendency we all have to use our own culture's values, our ideas of what's beautiful, what's moral, what's worthy, as the yardstick to judge everyone else. And of course, everyone else usually comes up short, right? And it turns out this is a universal human thing. This quote is a perfect example. When people in Highland New Guinea first saw Europeans, they had no existing category for them. The only way they could make sense of these strange pale beings was through their own cultural lens. They had to be the ghosts of their ancestors. We all interpret the unknown through the lens of what we already know. So what was Boas's solution to this problem of ethnocentrism? It was this beautiful idea right here: cultural relativism. He argued that to truly understand another culture, you have to suspend your own judgment. You have to hit pause, you have to approach it on its own terms and really try to understand its internal logic, not just measure it against your own. This became an absolute cornerstone of modern anthropology. So Boas's ideas were absolutely revolutionary and profoundly influential, but like any major theory, it has been celebrated and critiqued. So let's take a balanced, honest look at its legacy.
On the contribution side, the list is huge. I mean, he basically established fieldwork and cultural relativism as essential tools. He championed a data-first approach, and he proved that every culture has a valid history of its own. But the criticisms are really important too. By focusing so intensely on uniqueness, it can be hard to make broader comparisons between cultures. Critics also argue it can sometimes overlook power dynamics, like for instance studying a culture's traditions without fully accounting for the impact of colonialism. And some say that just collecting facts without a guiding theory can become kind of a directionless process.
And all of that leaves us with this fundamental question that anthropologists are still grappling with today. Boas taught us to see the world as this beautiful mosaic of unique cultures. But in celebrating all that amazing diversity, do we risk losing sight of the common threads that unite us all? It's a big one to think about. What do you think?